Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another great episode of Crushing Strongholds. This is a podcast where we turn pain into power, trauma into triumph, and a place where we get to be a better version of ourselves. And it's also a place where we get to expose the lies of the enemy. And how do we do that? We do that through the truth and the love of Jesus Christ. It's also a place where we get to share testimonies of our faith and what God has brought us through. And I honestly believe in my heart that as we share testimonies, it really helps to dismantle strongholds that we face. And today I'm really excited. I have a wonderful guest. He is an author, he's a coach, a former pastor of 25 years in the ministry, experienced publishing the book, The Wilderness Way. Finding Freedom in Life's Fractures, which is a great title. I love the title of this book. Um, and all around just seems like a really great individual, and I cannot wait to introduce him. So, Dustin, welcome to Crushing Strongholds. Glad to have you here today.
Hey, Mickey, thank you for having me. Super excited for this conversation and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, I'm excited. You have been in a pastoral position for 25 years, and then you decided to write a book. And so I'm sure you've seen and dealt with a lot of different types of things. Like I noticed when I was reading through some of your stuff, some of the stuff that you've navigated through with burnout, helping ministry leaders and people dealing with grief and doubt and spiritual um, disillusionment. So, what about for yourself? What kind of testimonies have you had to face?
Yeah, I think that a lot of those. One of the cool things I think about my relationship with God from the very beginning, I became a Christian in high school, was that the way He wired me is I'm designed to help others based on what I'm learning. So it's always been, a lot of it's been out of my own mistakes. Like as I mess up, I'm like, okay, store that one away for later. And then I'm able to it gives me a sense of connectedness and empathy for others as I've helped them navigate their experiences. And it served me really well in ministry. For all those years, growing up, I grew up in a messy childhood, messy home. And so I already had even going in a lot of trauma, you could say, from abuse and just neglect, all kinds of different things going on in my early childhood. And so, by the time I came to faith in high school, you've built all these layers that you don't even necessarily know are there that are really driving a lot of your disposition. And in late high school, I had a really cool experience with the Lord, where I really started to I hone in on this my sense of worth and identity. And that was a big deal because I had felt very much like, and I think it's been an ongoing narrative, and I'm sure this will tie into even later on, but the sense that I was not enough or was too much. So I'm a pretty big personality. So simultaneously I would feel like I'm not enough for people and then I'm too much for people. And so it created an insecurity in me that, in many ways fueled much of my youth and early 20s. It fueled, in a good way, it sparked me to pursue growth and development, and becoming a better version of myself. But then there's always the shadow side, right? Where it's like this kind of clamoring for significance or a sense of purpose. And in all of that, like I don't think that's why I went into ministry. I know I genuinely went into ministry because I loved the church. I loved how the church had supported me and become my family, having such a messed up family. And then also wanting to help others with that in so many ways. So, like, those were like core kind of things that have plagued me is probably the wrong word, but things that have been common threads through my whole spiritual journey that were in many ways strongholds. Like when I was thinking about this conversation, and I was like, okay, what were these strongholds in my life? Ironically, I would say the biggest stronghold was me. Like it was me buying the lies that the enemy would subtly feed all the way through, and not, even though I knew truth, struggling to integrate that truth into my whole life.
That's That's a great way to sum that up because I've always said that even with myself that sometimes we have to get out of our own way.
Hmm.
We end up being our roadblock, and um, I can kind of relate with you with growing up in an abusive childhood and foster homes and just across the board, and I realized that it kind of shapes and molds us into who we are. And one thing I've realized over probably the last 6 years, is we don't have to allow that to continue to be what shapes us. We can change our pathway to go a different direction. Um, we can still use that as a reminder and as a tool to help us not want to go that way. Because I know sometimes, like for myself, there's so many ways and directions I could have gone in my life, but I'm so thankful that I didn't. But there's also better directions that I could have gone in my life, and I wish I had. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, 100%. And it's that difference between like decisions have consequences, good, bad, indifferent, right? So decisions I make have consequences in my life. And like you said, yeah, there's things I look back and go, if only I had, right?
Mhm.
And then there's other decisions I'm like, whoo, good, dodge that bullet. Like, glad we didn't go that direction. But
Yeah.
there's also just the reality of other people's consequences on us that we really had no choice in many ways. And all of those things do shape us into the person we are, good, bad, indifferent. But you're right in the sense that those may have an impact, but they don't have to define us. They don't define who we are. They don't define our future. They don't define our hope. And I think, and a lot of times that's the battle is, that like, this experience has absolutely shaped me in ways that I noticed, in ways that I didn't notice. And then out of that, decisions were made. And this is just the messiness of living in a broken world, right? And yet none of those define who I am. None of those define how I choose to take my next step, whatever that next step is. But they are going to have an influence at times. And that's just, again, that's part of this journey that we call life, of especially trying to follow Jesus in the middle of it all.
Right, exactly. I noticed that when you talked a little bit in the beginning, you started talking about how you felt like you're never enough. One common thing that I hear with this specific podcast, especially with Crushing Strongholds, um, I would say the number one thing that I hear the most is people say that they felt like they were never enough. And I could relate with that because I literally was told in my lifetime I would never measure up for many, many
Hmm.
years. And so I used to try to be one up on everything, because I always
Hmm.
wanted to measure up. And even at
Totally.
that, yeah, I never still felt like I was measuring up. And I'm like, how much do I got to do to measure up, And it
Yes.
was really a struggle, Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. And, I think that for me, in my childhood, with the kind of stuff that was going on in my family, me meeting a standard of expectation, behaviorally, and all those educationally, all those things kept the temperature in that home down.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I mean, again, this is years of therapy and like, as I like to call it, an expensive friend who I sit with and regularly dialogue. And as we've unpacked things, it was, that pursuit of being more or being better or doing better, was a way of a protection mechanism. It protected me from a volatile stepdad and the impact of that in my family. And so I think that's there's kind of like a genesis of where that came from. And then on top of that, I'm prideful. Like, I have my own pride. I have my own desires to be something and to do something and to be significant and make a difference and all those kinds of things. And again, it's always this weird mix of there's good in that and a shadow side. And I think earlier on, I was a lot more binary in the sense of like I got to get rid of those bad ideas and only hold on to the good ideas, which is impossible. Like, we can't untether those from our pure motive or our true motives. And so it really became more about how to confess, like, okay, Lord, like when I was teaching in the church, it was like, there was a part of me, it's like, Lord, I want your word to impact people and I want to see people's lives change, and I know it's not about me. And then there's another part of me that's going, and I really hope I get a lot of accolades and that, this clip goes viral or whatever, like those
Right.
weird thoughts that are bouncing around. And a friend of mine actually once and I were having a conversation. And he said, yeah, he's like, I've learned that suppressing it doesn't work. And so I just started confessing it. And it was that idea of coming in and just going, God, both of these things are true. I want you to move in power and I really like attention, and you're going to have to sort all of that out. And I'm just going to do my best to be faithful. Like it just became, it was the only way that I could do the mental gymnastics on it all. And it helped free me up from some of that back and forth.
Yeah, that is great. I love that analogy because, I think I always think to when I have conversations with God, I'm like, he probably just thinks I'm a train wreck. Like, what is going on with this person's head? And I mean, I know he already knows what's going on. And I'm like, it's funny how we try to advise God, we try to explain it to
Mm-hmm.
God, but he's an
Mm-hmm.
all-knowing God, and we're the ones that are not all-knowing, but we think we know
Yep.
enough to tell God what all about it. And it's not that he
Totally.
doesn't want to hear it, but I think it's funny that we just have to explain it all out, and express ourselves, and God's kind of
Yeah.
like, he probably sitting
And
there
we're
shaking
almost
his head.
we're trying to convince ourselves, I think, as
Yeah.
much as like one of my favorite passages of scripture is in the end of book of John. You have that scene where, Jesus has resurrected and the disciples are out fishing and they see this guy on the shoreline. They realize Peter goes, it's the Lord. And John jumps, or I mean, sorry, John says it's the Lord, and Peter jumps out of the boat and swims to shore and finds Jesus, and he's made a meal for him. And after a little while, they go for a walk, Jesus and Peter, because this is on the heels of Jesus's or Peter's denial of Jesus, where he denied him 3 times. And in that interaction, Jesus says, do you love me? And Peter says, I love you. And he says, okay, feed my sheep. And then he says it again. And then he says it again. And it's 3 times, obviously, that parallel the 3 denials. But on the 3rd time, it's really interesting because, Jesus says, do you love me more than these? And Peter says, you know all things. And it's like at that moment, I really believe what Peter's doing is he's letting go of trying to convince Jesus how much he loves him. And he just realized, look, you know all things. You know I love you. You know more of me than I know of me. So why, like, I'm done trying to sell myself to you. And for me, like those types of things, especially fighting some of that identity battle and the sense of succeeding in one area or failing in other areas or feeling like a failure or all of the stuff that goes on around that. I think that that's why that passage is so powerful to me, is because it reminds me, like, I don't have to prove myself to God. I don't have to convince him, or me for that matter, that I'm worthy of his love, or that, any of those kinds of things. I can just say, look, like, like even when I journal, as so much of my journaling is just, like, you get it.
Yeah, yeah, that's I love that parallel because um and I think you're spot on when he says that 3 times about, hey, if you love me, then feed my sheep, 3 times because of the denial process. And it's funny how we deny Christ often, and we don't realize that, that we have denied him. And I always think to myself, oh Lord, if I don't, it's never been intentional for me. But I know there are times that I know that I probably have. Um,
Mhm.
but as we're walking, and we're walking and we're searching out who Jesus is, we're trying to, well, again, level up, or that one up, like
Mhm.
I was saying before. But God doesn't have that expectation of us. He doesn't at all. We do with ourselves and we do with others around us, but God never put that on us.
Nope.
That's a worldly thing that the enemy puts on us. We did that
100%.
to ourselves. And that's a stronghold where we put this requirement on us, and it wasn't even necessary. So like we're trying to do so much in the world, and God sometimes wants us just to be Mary and just sit at his feet.
Mhm.
And we have to remember that we have to have the balance of
Yes.
the
Yes.
going and the serving and the sitting and the intimate times with Jesus, because we forget that. And that's where
Yes.
people lose sight. They get so focused on the going, and not that service is bad, it's not bad at all. But if
Mhm.
that's a priority over your relationship with Christ, then it is a problem. It is a problem if it even if it is ministry, or if it's
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're doing. If it's taking your eyes off from Jesus, then that can be that distraction's a problem because it interferes with your relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. The illustration I've used in the past is, like I remember when when our boys were younger, they'd be riding their bikes up front and my son would be like, "Hey, look what I can do." And like he'd stand on his frame of his bike and stick a foot out or whatever. And I would be like, "Yeah, that's cool, man. Like, that's great." But I'm not really that impressed. Like, it's not like I'm
Yeah,
going, "Wow."
right.
you know and I think God's like that with us oftentimes. It's like, yeah, great, I'm glad that's awesome that you're doing that, but I'm not impressed. Like, that's not my heart for you. Has nothing to do with whether or not you can do a 1 footer on your bike. Like, my desire is that, like you said, that you would be with me, that you would walk with me, that you would
Yeah,
trust in me. And it isn't about trying harder as much as it's about surrendering more. And so what does it look like to live a life of surrender? And again, that doesn't mean that there isn't effort. It doesn't mean that we don't have to persevere. It doesn't mean any of those things. But I'm a horrible golfer. I hate the sport with every fiber of my being. And the reason is because my anytime I get a good shot, my next compulsion is to try and swing harder. And it never goes right. The harder I try, the worse it goes. And then I'm just chasing balls all over a course and saying words I'm not allowed to say in front of my friends. And it's just a bad day. But it is that, like I think our spiritual journey is so much like a golf swing, in the sense that, like, it is more about the mechanics of what does it look like to walk with Jesus and to be present with him, and to believe fully and trust fully that what he says is true. And then I can rest in that. And then out of that, what does he have for me today? What does faithfulness to today look like? And how do I live in such a way that it honors him and impacts the world around me?
yeah, yeah. That's really good. A quick story, a little side note for you. When I used to be the manager of a golf course called Southridge in California.
Uh-huh.
And the owner's son, he was a tyrant and he would get me into trouble all the time, but he was a lot of fun to hang out with. So we'd do golf car races, and we'd chase people on on the grounds.
That's
And
great.
I mean, we were in trouble. So one time it was up in the mountains, and he took me up on this back hill, and I thought, oh, is this guy gonna murder me or what? This young kid. I'm like, where are we going? And he had this big bucket of balls, and he's like, so we were standing up on top of the hill above the golf course, and we were hitting the balls on the golf course while they were golfing. And
Oh
all
my
of a sudden you
goodness.
hear a couple of guys start swearing, like, what the blankety blank blank. And I'm like, this is really not a good idea. We're making people mad, and the balls are just coming from nowhere, right? Because they're looking around like, what in the world's going on? And I was like, this is so bad. So that was my idea of golfing. So that was
Yeah.
the fun
So
for me.
I tried for a while. I had a friend actually who was the manager of a course near
Mhm.
where I lived, and he's like, "Hey, I'll give you free range tickets. You can come try." And it was like a couple months, and I'm like, "Man, this is just if this is supposed to be relaxing, this is the wrong sport for me. Like, I can't. This is not going to be what works for me."
Yeah, you should have just did the opposite, went up on the hill and just hit the bucket of balls off, because I'm telling you, it was very therapeutic for me. So
Yeah, I'm sure much more therapeutic.
yeah,
Yes.
I didn't have no goal in sight. You know what I mean? It made it so
Yes.
much easier when you don't have to focus on that little tiny spot in the ground.
100%.
So
Yes.
yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting story, because you were sharing that. I don't like to golf much either. Even miniature golf, I'm not very good at, and I
Hmm.
go just for the fun of it, and I try not to, bring on the pressure. Something I
Yep.
was reading on your website that I wanted to touch base on, when you're talking about your book, and I want to
Hmm.
quote it actually. Because it's talking about the wilderness way, finding freedom in life's fractures, and it grew from the same soil. But something that you wrote just after that, it says the book is for those who have been told to just have faith when what they needed was permission to be honest. I love that, because I was literally having a conversation with someone yesterday. And so this resonates really deeply with me. And she said if nothing frustrates her more than somebody that says, well, you just don't have enough faith. So can you touch base on that? What your thought is? Because it really struck me. And I said, because I was talking about, Peter, when Jesus says to Peter, he steps out on the boat and steps out on the water. I mean, and
Hmm.
Peter takes his eyes off Jesus and he starts to sink. And
Yep.
Jesus is like, why are you sinking? You have little faith, right?
Hmm.
And of course, then there's also the parable to that. It's like you only need the faith of a mustard seed, which is very minute and so tiny. We barely
Hmm.
have to have any. So it's kind of like it can be. in so many different comparisons on so many different levels of
Yeah.
how much or how little faith you need to have. But I loved what you said here that said, um, what they need was permission just to be honest. And honestly, that is a great way to word that. I never heard
Hmm.
it worded like that before. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing because we shouldn't tell people, well, you don't have enough faith, you're lacking faith, because I think that really does discourage people with their own walk with Jesus. Like, oh man, again, it makes us feel like we don't measure up or we're not ever going to be good enough because now I don't even have enough faith to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
wanted to know if you,
We become, what happens is it's so subtle too. Like the enemy is so subtle with these things because, but what it does is it turns the object of the faith to us. So, I had a pastor friend who said this and it always stuck with me. He goes, the primary goal is not the amount of faith you have, it's what the object of your faith is. And so when Jesus is telling Peter, you of little faith, I don't think, and I'd have to check the Greek to see if I'm way off here, but I really don't think the heart of what he's saying is you don't have enough faith. Because what just happened, he took his eyes off of Jesus.
right,
And
right,
so what happened was all the things around him, the storm specifically, got bigger and Jesus got smaller in his field of vision. And so I think that faith for us is a lot more about what the object of the faith is. And the quote you're mentioning from the book was this idea that um, I truly believe that honesty is and vulnerability, first to the Lord and then with people we trust, is probably the best exercise of faith. Because it strips away that performative, like, no, I can do it, I can get it. There's this weird thing that happens in Christianity, I find, where we come to Jesus by grace through faith, right? And so I can't save myself, I can't get to heaven on my own, and so I give myself to Jesus. But then we live as though, in order to sustain that or grow that, it's on us. And again, not that there isn't responsibility. That's the beauty of this cooperative relationship where God gives us agency and he gives us a spirit and he says, you got to make good decisions. But at the same time, my faith and my spiritual growth isn't just now it's not just me pull up my bootstraps and try and figure it out, but it is, fixing my eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of my faith, right? It is, the abide in me and John, right? Like remain in me. Like that's like a good fruit comes off of a tree that's rooted in me. And, I think that compulsion in our mind is, okay, I need to figure out how to stop thinking or doing these bad things and start thinking or doing these good things. And if I'm not doing enough of the good things or thinking enough of the good things, that means that my faith isn't strong enough. And it becomes a law of diminishing returns rather than saying, okay, like, and I've had multiple seasons of these lives or in my life where it's like, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to stop doing this. Or I'm trying to be a better husband or a better father or a better whatever. And all I'm doing is tripping and falling on my face and it's only getting worse.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
so it's like, no, no, no. Like, okay, Lord, I need you in this. Like, I need to start with you. You mentioned it earlier, Mary and Martha, right? Like I need some Mary time. I need to learn to rest in that um, and not feel like I'm like God is not the Russian judge in the Olympics holding up a number card saying, "Oh, you get a 4.5 today.
yeah,
Maybe tomorrow's going to be a 7." Like that's not how his disposition towards us. But so much of as much as I know that intellectually, spent a lot of money going to Bible colleges and seminaries to learn the Bible doesn't teach us that. It still can become the default posture of my heart subtly in a way that I still start to wrestle with and believe, yeah, but I gotta figure out, or I gotta fix this, or I gotta whatever it would be. And it ends up entangling me as much as it does setting me free.
right. I realized with my walk with the Lord that for many years I used to seek validation from other people like
Hmm.
immensely because I wanted to be a people pleaser. I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to get that merit, that merit badge that, I was often told I would never ever get. I'm like, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do this for you and you'll see, And I remember somebody, one of my friends said, "Why do you seek out validation so much?" And I was like, "Wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that." And I'm glad
Hmm.
they were really honest with me and telling me that. And then I thought, you know what? That is insane because I was validated the day Jesus went to the cross.
Yep.
And I had to really sit down and meditate with the Lord on that because I was like really, really seeking out, you know, what other people thought of me or what I could do to impress somebody. Or again, like you said, like we like that attention. And we all need to, feel needed and loved and wanted
A
and
hundred percent.
accepted.
Yeah.
That's a natural thing. But it's to the point where I'm like, I'm going to go above and beyond to get this validation. It's kind of like when you go to
Yeah.
the parking garage, you're like, I'm going to take this ticket and it's going to get stamped and I don't have to pay you know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to get validated. And I didn't realize that, it was so evident that like a friend of mine literally said, "You really, really have a problem with seeking validation." And I was like, wow, thank you for telling me because I didn't even realize it was evident. I was
Hmm.
showing it, and I was like, wow. But when I sat at Jesus's feet, Jesus simply just said, I validated you when I went to the cross. You don't need
Hmm.
any more.
Yes.
I never needed it after that. I mean, I have never ever sought to be validated again. And it was
Yeah.
just it was a peaceful, like you said, the surrendering all. It was so
Hmm.
peaceful for me that just because he just literally just was like, you don't need it. Like you have already done it, it's like, it's finished, it's written, it's enough. But we
Yes.
always think it's not enough. For some reason, it's not enough. It's not enough. We have to do more to impress or more to whatever. And it's like, God is so simple and we are so complex. We're the complex ones. God's not. We always say, "Oh, God's so difficult." No, he's not. He's so simple. If we just look at it, from a reverse analogy, it's like he's so
Yeah.
easy to read. And we're the ones that mess it up and make it complicated. He's like, it's
Well,
really
that
simple.
goes back to the faith conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like having the faith of a mustard seed is literally just taking him at his word.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
when he says when he says, "Look, you're enough," like, or I'm enough, you don't, I have no expectations on you to be more than what I've created you to be. That's again back to, like, there's a guy in Mark who comes to Jesus and says, um, if you could, would you heal my, I think, servant? I don't remember if it's servant or son, maybe it's son. And Jesus basically calls him out and goes, "If." And the man says, "I believe, but help my unbelief," right? That is like such a beautiful picture of everything we're talking about. It's like, it isn't that I don't know it intellectually. It isn't that I don't want to believe it. It's just a matter of, will I take Jesus at his word moment by moment, day by day, and say, okay, like, I'm going to trust that even though there's something in me that is craving more validation, I don't need that. Like, it's not it. I don't have to have that in order to be whole and to be at peace.
Yeah, I know that my daughter and we own a bookstore and art gallery. And when we first opened it, I teach art classes every weekend,
Awesome.
And since I started podcasting, it's really kind of helped me to relax as an instructor because I love painting. I just really wasn't sure that of the instructing part. I just kind of like want them, here's how to do it, just do it. I didn't want to really have to teach it. I kind of
Yeah.
wanted them just to figure it out. Some people kind of just really need to be taught. I learned that it is a teaching process. And my daughter was telling me, she's like, "Mom, you've developed from the first time you did a teaching class to now." She's like, you have developed in such a way that it's so enjoyable. She's like, "I love watching you teach your class now." She goes, "In the
That's
beginning,
awesome.
I was a little worried." She goes, "I'm not gonna lie, I was so worried." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "I think that podcast is really helping you, communicate better and understand how to speak to people instead of just like, here, put the paint there and just do it,
Yeah.
and
And
teach,
we become more
people."
comfortable in our own skin, and
Mhm.
yeah, 100%. That's awesome.
But I think the word of God, where I was going with that is I believe that the word of God, we already have that tool, but sometimes we complicate it because we try to dissect it to where we can't figure it out. I've heard so many people say, "Oh, I can't read the Bible; it's too difficult." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Hmm.
And I don't say that out loud because I don't want them to be like, "Wow, rude." But I'm just like, I when I read the word, and there are parts that I don't understand. Because I'm
Totally.
not a theologian. I have an associate's and bachelor's degree in ministry and whatnot. But I know every single day up until the day I die, I'm going to learn something new about the Word of God. God's going to teach me
Yeah.
something great and wonderful, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, I don't think it's difficult. I think we make it difficult. We try to
Yeah.
make it
Because again, we overreach, right? Like
yeah,
we feel like we have to figure out every nuance and answer every, cross every T and dot every I, and that's not necessarily the right angle to come at it with.
yeah. So now you wrote The Wilderness Way, and you also
Hmm.
have a song called Light and Love, which was amazing. I listened to it this
Thank you.
morning. So I'm
Thank you.
encouraging all of my listeners to go to YouTube and look up Light and Love and listen to it. Actually, I'll put it in the show notes there. You can actually, I'll link it there.
Great. Thank you.
Great, great, great song, by the way. It was wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
is The Wilderness Way the only book that you've written? That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. Yes. I wrote The Wilderness Way. That was my first real book. And then I wrote a companion workbook that is alongside it too. That's available. That's for like small groups or personal study. And it's basically 6 sessions. Each session covers 2 chapters of the book. And it just allows you, again, like I've always been passionate about getting past knowledge into integration. So not just how do we learn these things, but how do these things actually shape us, and how do we wrestle through them? And so that's why I did the workbook in addition to it. Yeah, so both of those are available. I have ideas for a second book. I've started light research, but I haven't dove into it yet. I've been focused on this book and this project and this conversation, and why I think it's an important conversation for people to be able to have.
Right. It sounds like a really good book. I haven't read it yet. I am very interested. I was reading about it, and
Mhm.
it looks like a really great read. It just even right off the bat, just some of the stuff that you said, the verbiage, just in describing the book is really great. And you also have a podcast, and
Mhm.
so on your podcast, is it a solo podcast? Do you have guests? Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, right. It's solo right now. Right now, what it's been is just kind of revamping and kind of resharing some of the messages that I've taught over the years at the different churches I've been on leadership, and around this theme of wilderness and wrestling with like the basic thesis of the book is the idea that if in the Exodus narrative you see God rescues Israel from slavery in Egypt and he promises them a promised land, but then they spend 40 years in the wilderness. And the parallel I drew to my own journey was I've been rescued from slavery in Jesus when I came to faith. And one day I will be in the promised land. One day there will be no more sorrow and no more tears, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and God's home will be among his people. But this life, in many ways, is the wilderness. And I think I used to think of it as I went through a season of wilderness. And what I've realized is that in many ways, this life is a wilderness because it's always going to be a mix of both beauty and brokenness. And there's always going to be a complexity to it, like we've talked about. Like you can have beautiful things happening and hard things happening to you and to those around you. And rather than trying to figure out how to get out of the hard things, it's become for me more about how do I see God's presence walking with me in the midst of it? Where's the pillars of cloud or the pillars of fire in the cloud? Where's the manna that he's providing? And for me, coming out of a really hard burnout transition in ministry and a sense of failure and loss of sense of worth and identity, that was where God really met me and said, hey, maybe the issue isn't so much the circumstances you're in, but the expectations you had of what it was going to look like. That somehow you believe that if you just did everything that I told you to, that everything was going to be rainbows and butterflies, and it just isn't. Like that's not how life works. And so that's where it's that permission to be honest is like the Bible teaches us about lament over and over and over again, and yet it's not something we as humans and especially as Christians do very well. There is this compulsion to be like, yeah, but then and we can get to the other side. And so we almost bypass lament for the promises. And again, promises are good, but the lamenting is actually a big part of our journey of learning to say, like, God, this is really hard, and I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know what you're doing. But I know you're here, and I have these other people here with me, and there's a measure of comfort and peace that can come just from that.
Yeah, I think that's, where that scripture comes in. It says, do not lean on your own understanding.
Yes.
It kind of
Uh-huh.
sums that up, and we want to lean on, like, oh, I got this, God. I figured it out and I learned it. Now I can do it. And I
Yes.
know God wants to see us do it, just like you want to watch your son do tricks on his bike and he's got it and yay,
Yep.
yay, great. Um, but God just doesn't want us to take off and do it alone. One thing
Yeah.
that you were talking about real quick was, when you're talking about burnout, church burnout, on
Hmm.
the side of being a pastor, um, on the opposite side of that, I've talked to so many Christians that have dealt with church hurt. So,
Hmm.
and I don't know if that, with it being a pastor and having burnout, if that can correlate or not. But I'm wondering, how would you explain to someone who has dealt with a lot of church hurts and they just don't want to go back anymore? They just like, yeah, I'll listen to my worship music and I'll read the word, but I'm not going to church anymore. And I don't trust
Yeah.
any of you guys. I'm done. You know?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is you're not wrong. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. And on my side, there was a fair amount of church hurt in a couple of the last ministry experiences I was in where I got beat up pretty good, even at a leadership level, even not as a senior leader, and then going back and being a senior leader, and just the messiness of the church in that sense. And so the first thing I would tell people is 100% your hurt and your pain is valid. And um, that doesn't mean you should just go jump into another church and good luck. So there's like, I wouldn't just, again, that'd be like bypassing it. Like, oh, you'll be fine. Just go find a new church.
Right.
And at the same time, the church is the bride of Christ and God's given us one another. And I think that the best thing that people can do is begin to pray and explore opportunities and start looking for churches that could align with what they value.
Right. Yeah.
And I think one of the greatest tells is, can you sit down with someone from leadership and share your story? If you get into a church and you can't find a way to sit down and say, "Hey, I've had some hurt in the past. Here's what I've walked through," and if that's met with dismissiveness or, again, you have to trust the spirit in that stuff. Then yeah, pull the ripcord, get out of there as quickly as you can, because unfortunately, that is a reality. That there is church can be as messy of a place as anywhere else, and
Right.
in many ways
Exactly.
more messy,
Hmm.
unfortunately. But I still believe, I've been a vocational ministry for 25 years. I was, part of a church before that, as a young person. We really never took time off from church after my burnout and frustrations. The way we approached it was very different. But I believe that the church is an essential part of growth and healing, even, but it's going to have to be the right environment, and the right opportunity. And it's a little like dating, right? Like you kind of have to, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we broke up and my heart's broken. And at some point it's like, yes, but that doesn't mean that all men or all women are horrible.
Right.
And any genuine relationship is going to require risk.
Yeah.
And so you can't get the payoff of a genuine relationship with others without risk. And maybe it's not the season for some people. It's like, no, I'm not ready to risk. And I would totally validate that experience. But I would say, like, if you have one or two people who are also Jesus followers who you love and you trust, make it a habit of connecting with them regularly, and just being the
Good.
church together. So at least you have that, because nothing's more dangerous than isolation. Like we've talked so
Yes.
much about
Yes.
how our own hearts are so deceiving. And so if you're walking through a season of suffering and struggle through wounds like that, just don't do it alone. Find one or two people, ideally the person that will talk straight with you, like you talked about with your friend. And I've had people in my life who are able to go, I think you're off base here. Like, you want those people in your life because they're going to be the ones who can help you to heal in those circumstances.
Yeah. I think that, when people see you from the outside, where you don't see yourself from the outside, they're looking at you from a different lens, and they can see
Yeah.
different perspectives. One thing I wanted to mention with church hurt also is, I want your take on this. Sometimes I feel like people go to a church with such high expectations that they're automatically going to be let down. Like they walk
Uh-huh.
in and they expect the pastor to be they expect the pastor to say this, to walk like this, to talk like this, to be
Hmm.
married to to have this type of family, to have, and it's like, my goodness, like leave the expectations at the door and go in and let Holy Spirit work in your life, and
Yes.
stop bringing all that to the table, because you're just sitting there. And what I find, I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's so discouraging to watch people just watch people, like they just watch, they're watching the room, like, and I
Hmm.
always wonder, are they thinking a good thought or a bad thought? You know,
Hmm.
is it a judgmental thought, or is it like, oh, that person looks so lovely today, instead of, ooh, that person, or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
It's so crazy how, I think about that and I'm like, oh my goodness, you have to sometimes, I tell people, like, as being a foster mom for 7 years, I tell
Hmm.
my kids, sometimes you have to leave your baggage at the door and just take a chance on trying something new. You
100%.
we all have a lot of baggage to carry. We all have a lot of hurt, pain, anger, frustration. But sometimes you just got to set that down and come on in and just sit down at the table and let's have dinner and talk
Yeah.
about a good day. And I think that we do that with the churches. Do you see that as well?
Yes, a lot. And here's what I'll say to anyone listening. Whatever church you walk into, the guy standing up in front, he's as much of an idiot as you are. Like, I promise
Amen.
you, he is
Yeah.
or she is. We are all a big ball of mess.
Yeah.
And you cannot engage a real relationship in a community or with people without the reality that at some point you're going to find yourself disappointed or hurt. Like it's just there, it's inescapable in many ways. And so, and I get it. Like people come in and like I like to say that in some ways that we've built, like the Western church has built the monster that's consuming it, because we have built this consumer oriented machine that feels very corporate to a degree and very very performative at times. Again, not all churches, but just there's a kind of, the Western church is very different, like, than the early church.
Right.
And I'm not saying all the modeling is bad. I'm just saying that there's an unintended consequence of that, is that there feels like, when you have a stage, there just naturally feels like there's a distance from the stage to the third row. That person is on a pedestal physically. And so it's not hard to imagine that that would then create a sense of like, well, that person has it way more together than I do. And you would hope they would. I mean, the Bible gives us, standards for leadership, and you would hope that they have that they're not totally off the rails, but at the same time, that there can't be an expectation that somehow they're this perfectly curated, they've figured it out, like they've got the secret sauce of what it means to follow Jesus. Um, but that they're living more surrendered. Like again, back to the trying harder versus surrendering more. And they're walking in transparency and authenticity and vulnerability with people in their lives. That to me, I find are the healthier of the church environments. Vulnerability is a result of safety. So it's a byproduct of safety. So if you want vulnerability, you got to have safety. And so if a church wants people to really be able to live authentically and vulnerably, you have to create an environment of safety. And that goes from the top down. So leaders who are honest and again, not that they get up and air all their dirty laundry on Sundays, but
Right.
like they got people that walk with them, and they're being challenged and counseled, and they wrestle with things. And there's a chapter in my book that I talk about. My neighbors have here in Texas, we have cottonwood trees. I don't know if you have those in Boise.
Nope.
Okay. So
Oh, yes,
cottonwood
we do.
trees
We
are
have cotton trees. Yes, we do. I'm sorry.
Okay, so cottonwood trees are the worst thing on the planet. They are proof of the fall to me.
They
So
smell
in this,
bad.
yes, so they smell bad, and and this is, by the way, total first world problem complaining that I'm doing right here. In the springtime, it's like little cotton balls come off of them, and they flood my yard and clog our air conditioning and clog our pool drain and all these things. And I talk about it in the book, how I despise this tree. I love my neighbors. I despise their tree, to the point where there was a point where I actually Google searched how to kill it. Like I was like,
Oh
if I
no.
could kill this tree, how could I do it? and I didn't go through with it, but the illustration is the idea that, look, other people's mess is always going to find its way into our yard.
That's good.
And in the church, other people's mess, that leader's mess is going to find its way into your yard in the same way that your mess is going to find its way into other people's yard. And so grace and forgiveness and patience, right? All the fruit of the spirit, all those things are stuff that we have to cultivate in order to be the person that we want others to be for us. Like I want to become the person with enough grace and empathy and patience to love and serve the person that I want them to have that for me. And so it's unfair for me to expect them to have their stuff together and to be there for me if I'm not willing to do the same for them. And so that just like lowering the bar to be like, look, we're all knuckleheads. And when you step on my toe, I'm going to say, ow. And then we're going to talk about it and we're going to
Yeah.
hopefully hug it out. And then we'll move on to the next thing and I'll step on your toe.
Yeah. One thing that I struggled with is I like small churches because I feel like the community is there. You walk in and
Mm-hmm.
people know your name. They know who you are. Opposed to the mega church and you go for 6 months and you see almost a new face at the door every day and nobody knows
Yeah.
your name. And true story, seriously, I was going to this church for quite a while, me and my grandmother, and I absolutely love the pastor. He's amazing. I still do. I still follow him. And he moved and bought a bigger church. And now he's like really onto the mega church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because I sat behind him. I had moved away and came back 7 years later, and I reintroduced myself to him again. I'm like, "Hey, I'm so and so, and I used to go to the little church, the little guy down the road, And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I kind of remember you." So I sat behind him for 6 months, and his preaching is phenomenal. Like I don't know, I love to hear him preach. But it's funny because I was sat behind him for 6 months, and he still didn't know. He would introduce himself to me every single Sunday because there's so many people in the church, he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
know anybody. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's a disconnection with mega churches, even though they do hubs and sub hubs and home groups, and
Yep.
and you have to go into the foyer and sign up for whatever it is you're looking for in a church to go to someone's group to have a conversation because there's so many people. I feel like
Yeah.
it's almost disconnecting instead of
Can be. Yeah,
connecting.
absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
it's really hard. I mean, having been on staff at a really large church, grew up at one that was really big, and it never felt big to me because I was integrated in. And that's where I came to faith. But it was a large church, couple, multiple thousands of people. Um, and then going to a medium-sized church on staff where, it started at about 250 when I got there. And then by the time I left 7 years later, it was over 800 people. Um, and it got more and more difficult to keep people connected and to know people. And because no one leader can be all of that to everybody. Like
right,
we call him a pastor or our pastor, but it's impossible for him to do what that word in the Bible is actually a verb. It's only a noun once. It's a verb. Pastoring is shepherding is a verb. And so he can only do that for so many people. Like Jesus only had 12. And
right,
so he had a lot of disciples, but it was 12 core guys. And even within that was a circle of four that were like, okay, these are the guys, these are my ride or dies that I'm really kind of invested into. So, and then, I went from that to a church plant where it was like really small and I could be that genuinely speaking for most people. And so it is a weird thing. Like I'm not an anti mega church guy. Because I think there's things that you can do in large churches, resource and leverage wise for a community and for people, especially people who are disconnected from church. It's a lot easier to slide in the back door of a bigger church and just kind of get the feel of things and not, especially if you're coming out of hurt or you don't know anything. Like you can play in the sandbox without having to commit yourself to it, at least for a while. Whereas like when we first started our church plan, it was a house church, and I had neighbors who were like, I'm not coming to your living room. I don't know if you're weird or not. Like,
yeah, right,
like, well, you could be kissing rattlesnakes for all I know. Like, I don't know what's going on, and I can't escape because it's your living
yeah,
room. So it's like there's always going to be this kind of tug and pull of how do you take a small community and make sure that it isn't just us four and no more, and that it really does have not only its own heart for community, but its heart to reach its community and can and do so. And then for big churches, it's always going to be, how do you create genuine relationships in a way that they can develop and people can love and serve and really be known and know one another and have access to leaders who can shepherd and care for them as well.
Yeah, that's really good. I love the backdoor example, because there are times when you're just, you're that newbie and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do here, and you feel a little awkward, and it's always uncomfortable the first time you step into a new church and what have you. But when I
Hmm.
moved back to California, I had um, joined a really small church. I mean, we grew. We went from a warehouse to an actual church building. We grew, but
Hmm.
um, everybody knew everybody, and we all knew and we all helped. Everybody helped everyone, and it was really great. I mean, people could just stop by my house from church, and it wouldn't be a problem. They'd be like,
Yeah,
"Hey, stop by," or if they needed something, they could ask. And like my wash machine went out, and I had foster kids, and one of the ladies from the church said, "I'm coming to get your laundry." I said, "No, you're not." She goes, "I'll be there
that's
in 20
awesome.
minutes." I was like,
That's
I go,
so
"You don't want
great.
to do our dirty laundry?" She goes, "Yes, I do." And
Yeah. And
what
that's
a
what you want,
blessing.
right? That's
Yeah,
what
it
you
was
want.
great.
And I don't think, I'll be honest, I don't think that's impossible in a larger church, but I do admit it's a lot more difficult to
Right,
foster.
right. So yeah, so when I came back here and I went to the church that I used to go to, and it had, gotten so big.
Hmm.
I literally was there for 6 months, and I didn't make one connection. I talked to people. I'm a sociable person, and I would say
Hmm.
hi, good morning, talk to people, but I never really made any connections with anyone. And
Yeah.
it kind of tugged on me a little bit. I still love the church. I go to the church
Yeah.
still. I love the pastor. I
Hmm.
love his wife. I love the youth ministry. There's a lot to it. And sometimes it's just putting your best foot forward, and you really have to make yourself engage in it to
Hmm.
get something out of it. Where at the smaller church, that you're automatically engaged because everybody's just engaged. Does that make
Yes.
sense? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. A larger church, you have to be a lot more proactive to find your way into the communities. And I mean, we've been at the church that we're a part of is a bigger church. Now my family and and I know some of the leaders, like I've become good friends with some of the leaders, but it has been a journey of like, how do we find our people in this ecosystem? Like, cause you're looking for those relationships that you can really connect with people, not even about like that you both like golf or whatever it would be, but
Yeah.
just because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, right. Nope.
But you're looking for those people. It's like, wow, these are people that for whatever reason I connect with. And I think that the Lord does lead us in that, but there's a patience to it and a trial and error. And it's like we went to one small group and it's like, hey, these are great people, but they're probably not our people long term. And so, you're just it takes more time, and there is a level of patience and trust in the Lord to go, okay, God, like what my heart wants, what I'm looking for, and so I'm praying you would provide it for me. Sorry, my
Right.
dogs are barking in the background.
That's okay. I'm surprised mine haven't barked yet either. It's okay. That's really awesome. So, well, on that note, actually, do you want to tell our listeners like how they can reach you, and
Yeah.
like talk about your coaching program, kind of like what you offer, and we'll kind of wrap up a little bit with some of that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is available on Amazon. It's called The Wilderness Way. And the workbook's there as well. There's ebook and then regular book. And then the easiest place to find me is my website, dustinkleinschmidt.com. Good luck spelling the last name.
Or saying it.
If you Google it and get in the ballpark, Google will find me. You just kind of have to Google it. That wildernesswaybook.com will take you to the page with the book stuff. But all of that stuff is there. The book, the coaching, the music. The music's available. The single "Light and Love" that you mentioned is available on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Music. It's out there as a single. Hopefully, a full album will be done in the next month or so. I got one song that just won't let itself be finished. And so we're trying to finish that up and then get the full album out. The coaching practice is something newer that I've started doing. And it's really just wanting to become a listening ear and a voice for leaders. And it doesn't have to be senior leaders, it could be any leader. But oftentimes in church ministry, especially, it's really hard to to be totally honest about what you're wrestling with the people you're wrestling with it with. And so having an outside perspective that can push you back towards your community, but then also be a place to process. And so the way I've structured it is it works in 90-day cycles. So it's like, hey, let's do 90 days. And let's figure out what your goals are. I work around four key things: spiritual health and growth, emotional health and growth, relational health and growth, and organizational health and growth, because I think all of those intertwine together. And we do a report every 90 days of like, hey, where are you at? What are the steps you've taken? And, how do what's the next mountain we want to try and climb? And so, yeah, that's available on the site, and it gives you all the information. I do a free 30-minute kind of get to know you and hear your story if people are interested, so I can kind of see if they think it's a fit, and we kind of go from there.
That's awesome. I will be putting all of that information in the show notes, so it'll
Thank
be
you.
easy for them to find you instead of having to try to Google.
Thank you.
They
Yes,
can
I
they can just
appreciate
go in
that.
there and go, there it is. I'll just click on
Much,
that link.
much better.
Yeah, and that so to your website and stuff. And I really do encourage all of our listeners to listen to that song. And I can't wait for that album to come out. That song was wonderful.
Thank you.
I wish I would have heard it, a long time ago because I know that's definitely one that'll be added to my playlist. I know for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Probably listen to it often, and I know I will share it often
Please do.
as well
Yes.
as this episode. So, but with that being said, I've really enjoyed our conversation with you today. It's been really wonderful. I've enjoyed every bit of it.
Me too,
And
Nikki. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And I hope that our listeners, I know our listeners, gained a lot, from
Mm.
our conversation and what have you. But to our listeners as well, um, Crushing Strongholds, we also have, the clarity call, and we also have the prayer. So if you're seeking out or need prayer for anything, you can go to crushingstrongholds.com and just ask for prayer, and I'll pray with you or pray for you. Anytime, at all. I always offer prayer out. And again, I think the coaching program that you offer would be wonderful. I mean, you have great conversation. You've been in the ministry for a long time, long enough. I'm sure you have seen enough to really get yourself experienced, in
We
a
could
lot
do
of
a
areas.
long form podcast. I have a lot
Yes.
of stories.
Yes, I bet. Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. I mean, just even with some of the stories that I've seen in my own churches, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I bet he has a lot to lot to share, which is really exciting. But yeah, look up The Wilderness Way to find the book. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes so you all can go in and check out the website, see everything that Dustin has to offer. There's a lot in there. It's great. It's wonderful. That song, just when you go into the website, just click on the song and then browse the website. That's what I encourage you to do. Seriously. Like
That's a
just
good idea.
yeah, no, that's what I
That's
did.
great.
I saw that you had a song and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I clicked it and I was like, wow, this is great. But actually I couldn't even browse through the website because I really enjoyed the song so much. I really just want to sit and listen to it. So
That's awesome.
either way you could do it, however you want to do it, whatever suits you. But um, yeah, what a wonderful conversation that I've had today. I've really enjoyed having you. I thank you so much for your time and dedication to coming on here with Crushing Strongholds. Thank you for sharing your testimony and kind of what you went through growing up. That helps a lot of people to realize that they're not alone with their own, strongholds. I think at our age, even for me, I know that sometimes people have said, aren't you past all that yet? Aren't you past all that yet? And for the most part I am, but it's still a part of who I am. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And
100%.
so when I talk about it, it's not to like rehash it or bring it up or tear off the scab and reopen a wound. It's so
Hmm.
that other people can realize that they're not alone in some of the stuff that I've encountered in my life.
Yep.
And look at what God has done in my life since then. Look how far
Yep.
he's brought me. Look what he's done. And I give all that glory to God. I can't even take credit
100%.
for that because if I was trying to give myself credit, I'd be still sitting in the pit that I was in for 3 years before I had to, seek out Jesus again.
Yeah. Yeah. The
So,
scars tell a story. Don't cover your scars.
oh yeah, absolutely. So, but anyhow, it's been an honor and a pleasure having you today. And so for all of
Same.
our listeners, we hope that you have a great day. Reach out to Dustin or myself for any of the needs that you have. Hopefully, we could fulfill those for you. And help you with your wandering or in the wilderness or
Hmm.
crushing some strongholds, whatever it may be.
All
There's,
the above.
yeah, all of the above. There's a lot to offer there, so I'm really thankful for that. So anyhow, in closing, I just want to say have a great day and y'all be blessed. And again, Dustin, thank you so much. It's been a great honor.
Thank you.
Yeah.